At the Los Angeles airport, flight attendants Jenny and Paula are preparing for their next flight. Captain Forrest and his co-pilot will chat with them and mention that, due to the approaching storm, they won't have many passengers tonight. We'll take some medication as he isn't feeling well. The flight attendants then introduce themselves to the passengers. George is a teenager who always flies alone and dislikes being overprotected. BV is with her husband, Dr. Kingston, who suffers from Parkinson's disease, preventing him from moving or speaking. The paramedic, Sheila, has a fear of flying, while Louise relaxes with her cat. Niall and Susan are expecting a baby and suffer from germophobia, wiping their seats before boarding. Forrest and Anne are nervous foreigners who don't speak English well. Hen has brought a hamster cage, and when Ralph tries to help him place it in the overhead bin, he gets bitten by one of the rodents. Since the cage doesn't fit, the flight attendants force Henry to place it in the cargo hold. Businessman Preston is constantly fidgeting and appears to suffer from the same illness as Will. As the plane finally takes off, Jenny has to remind Niall to hang up the phone, and when he refuses, Henry forces him to do so. The two men get angry and start arguing. Jenny sends them back to their seats, reminding them that they could be arrested for aggressive behavior. Henry then flirts with Jenny, tells her about his doctoral thesis, and comments on the lamentable state of societal manners. A little later, Henry watches the news and learns that the Center for Disease Control and Prevention has surrounded an entire residential building in Los Angeles. Meanwhile, Ralph feels unwell and asks for water while examining the wound on his thumb. Jenny notices he's sitting in an odd posture, and when she goes to check on him, he suddenly vomits directly onto her. Ralph even has foam at his mouth, prompting the flight attendants to take care of him. No one notices the cat sneaking around and licking the vomit off the floor. Jenny leaves the ailing man with Paula and G to wash off the vomit, but at that moment, Ralph suddenly runs down the aisle and knocks the girl to the floor. He begins angrily pounding on the cockpit door, demanding that the plane stop. Will follows protocol, locks the door, and Forrest alerts ground control. Henry tries to stop Ralph but instantly regrets it. The same happens to George. Preston, George, Paul, Sheila, and Henry then team up to subdue Ralph and eventually knock him unconscious. They handcuff the assailant with plastic restraints. Afterward, Sheila ensures that no one else is hurt, while Jenny confides in Paula that she wasn't able to handle the emergency situation effectively. At this moment, the captain announces that he's received orders to land the plane and instructs everyone to take their seats. The aircraft shakes violently during the descent, and the flight attendants urge everyone to keep their heads down. Ralph's body slides across the floor, causing Jenny and Paula to struggle to get him back into his seat. While Paula secures his seatbelt, Ralph suddenly wakes up with bloodshot eyes and bites her nose, causing severe injury. Ralph completely loses control, and the crew has to team up again to push him into the bathroom and lock him inside. When the plane finally lands, Sheila retrieves some medication from the first aid kit to prevent Paula from passing out from shock and wraps a scarf around her face, but she is losing a lot of blood and urgently needs medical help. Forrest is frustrated because the dispatcher on the ground orders them to wait despite knowing about the emergency on board, so the captain decides to break the rules and steer the plane to a random open landing spot. Fortunately, the cargo handler sees the approaching plane and opens the gate just in time. Forrest and will hold the aircraft's bathroom doors shut while everyone else desperately disembarks, except for BV and Kingston, who need outside help to move. He leads the group to another exit, but the door is locked, and there's no response to his radio call. The men have no choice but to follow through the service entrance to reach the terminal area. The group climbs the stairs and reaches other doors, only to find that they are all locked, which is very strange. When he checks the power supply, he is convinced that the doors are locked and that everything they do is being watched on active security cameras. A heated discussion about what to do next is interrupted by the sudden wailing of sirens. The people look out the window and see ambulances and police cars outside, but the windows are sealed shut. A voice over the intercom announces that the group has been placed under quarantine and that they must wait for assistance. The passengers call their families to let them know what's happening and scream at Jenny as if she were responsible for all the airline's decisions. Jenny doesn't know how to defend herself, but luckily Sheila interrupts the shouting passengers, reminding them that she has a first aid kit in her luggage that will help Paula survive for a few more hours. Jenny takes a few passengers with her to retrieve Sheila's luggage, but then the power goes out. E.T. shines a flashlight to guide them, and when they return to the plane, they realize that Will and Forrest have suddenly disappeared. Jenny opens the bathroom door and is horrified to see blood everywhere. Preston takes out his laptop and stumbles upon Kingston, sitting alone. His wife is nowhere to be seen. As the others wonder what happened, Kingston notices a pair of broken plastic handcuffs on the floor that have been crushed with someone's teeth. Meanwhile, he rips open the carpet on the floor to access a hatch that leads directly into the cargo hold. Jenny grabs Sheila's first aid kit, and Niall pulls out a gun from his suitcase. E.T. gets startled when a rodent runs past his feet, but he shoos it away, assuming it's a rat. However, Henry is convinced it's one of his hamsters since he found a broken cage earlier. As Jenny climbs out of the cargo hold, she looks around and notices Preston's laptop covered in blood. At the end of the corridor, Will is crouched on all fours, also covered in blood and growling. Suddenly, an infected Forrest appears behind Jenny and attacks her. The boys rush to help, but their punches have no effect. Niall shoots Forrest, and the captain's blood splashes onto his face. The group then bursts out of the plane and finds Kingston lying on the ground, thrown from his wheelchair, with a semi-conscious Preston who has been bitten on the neck from behind. Nearby, Jenny finds BV crying and pleading for help, but she suddenly transforms into a monster and attacks the girl. Luckily, Jenny manages to escape, and the men break down a door to lock BV outside. The group returns to the others, and Sheila does her best to take care of Paula. Susan wipes the blood from Niall's face, and despite everything, they share a kiss. Henry and E.T. block the door with furniture to keep BV from breaking in, and Jenny looks around, noticing blood droplets on the floor and wondering where they're coming from. Eventually, Jenny can't take it anymore and tells everyone to shut up, taking charge since the captain is dead. Sheila explains that it's an unknown virus, and Jenny recalls the residential building in the news that was recently completely quarantined. Kingston notices a rat nearby with very red eyes, but he doesn't have time to alert anyone. The rat jumps onto his head and manages to bite him before George throws it away. As the men trap the rat with a bucket, Sheila tends to the wound. The group then agrees to lock George and Paula in a cage in case they also turn into monsters. George catches the rat with a glove and notices a marking on its paw indicating it escaped from a lab. George claims that Henry brought the rat on board and lied about the hamsters because he saw the rodent in a cage on the plane earlier. When Henry denies it, Jenny pulls him aside to get the truth. Henry swears it wasn't him and points out that lab rats wouldn't have passed through airport security. The two hug to comfort each other, but at that moment, Ralph suddenly appears and lunges at Jenny. Henry can't stop him. The others hear the screams and rush to help. Together, they manage to strangle Ralph with a hose. At that moment, E.T. receives a radio call informing them that CDC agents have finally arrived. The group gathers at the door, but the 4 agents don't let them out. Instead, they enter, holding the entire group at gunpoint and taking Niall's rat and gun. They then approach Paula and Kingston to give them injections. The group demands an explanation, but the agents say they're just following protocol. The agents then order the others to agree to be injected as well. Everyone hesitates, so Louise volunteers first. But before she can be given the shot, her cat bites the woman on the neck and runs away. The agent opens fire, misses, and Kingston transforms into a monster, leaping onto the man to bite him. The other agents beat Kingston down and try to free their partner but find the door locked. They shoot at the door and run outside, prompting the infected to chase after them. The police open fire as soon as they see the people rushing out and kill everyone except for one agent who is shot in the leg. The group drags the surviving agent inside and locks the door. At that moment, they hear the roaring of the infected approaching and run to hide inside a container. Susan stops when she notices that Niall has foam coming out of his mouth, so the others have to pull her inside and explain that the man is also infected. After sealing the container, Sheila notices that each injection had a different color, indicating that people were given different drugs, not just what the protocol prescribed. Henry manages to raise his weapon and forces the agent to confess what he knows. It turns out that all the agents actually work for a bioterror organization under government control. A few hours earlier, one of their units visited the house in Los Angeles that was quarantined according to the news, and no one has come out since. On the attic floor of the house, the agents discovered a bioterror lab set up by a dangerous cult. The government tried to develop a cure using the blood of human survivors, but the virus only became more aggressive, so the experiments on humans were halted. After hearing from the passengers on the plane that rats were the disease carriers, the officer takes Henry's weapon and shoots himself. Nikki suffers a nervous breakdown at the site, and E.T. recalls that this terminal frequently floods due to an old sewer tunnel, meaning they could escape through it if they find a way in. Suddenly, Will appears in a hole in the container's roof and grabs E.T.'s arm. Henry tries to shoot him but has no ammunition left. He tells George to press the button that lifts the container, killing Will by pinning him against a beam. The group then leaves the container and sneaks across the grounds while Jenny notices that Henry has disappeared. Nika follows behind her, and suddenly something grabs her and pulls her into the darkness, causing the group to rush up the stairs to escape the danger. Henry secretly retrieves another weapon from his bag. While the group runs, Jenny stumbles and comes face to face with Paula, who has also turned into a monster. Jenny has to accept that her friend is gone and pushes Paula off the platform with a wrench, killing her. The group then makes their way to the office, where they search for blueprints of the terminal that show a passage through the wall leading to the sewer tunnel. Meanwhile, George reveals that he stole Henry's bag, which contains suspicious documents with lab experiment records and a mysterious box. At that moment, the mutated Susan and Niall find the survivors and try to attack them, but Henry returns and shoots them just in time. He notices that Henry has been bitten, and George seizes the opportunity to open the box containing the medication and a syringe. Henry finally admits that he was the one who brought the rats onto the plane and explains that he is a member of the cult mentioned by the officer. The cult's goal is to cleanse the planet of all humans, who are becoming more violent and destructive every day. Henry threatens to kill Jenny if George doesn't give him the antidote from the box, so E.T. rushes at him to stop him but is shot in the forehead. The others are now terrified and hand Henry the antidote, which he mixes with the blood from his wound and injects into his eye. He explains that his cult has followers in various organizations and that he smuggled the rats through airport security. Now ready to leave, Henry takes George as a hostage. Jenny tries to stop him, but Henry knocks her down and runs off with the teenager and the blueprints. Jenny becomes very dizzy, so Sheila goes out first. A few minutes later, Jenny also steps outside and is spotted by an infected Preston. This leads to a chase where Preston almost catches the girl, forcing Jenny to push him away. She then lures Preston to a machine and smashes his head in with a manhole cover until he dies. Afterward, Jenny continues her search for George and has to take another path when she spots a mutated Nika nearby. When she enters another room, she finds Sheila, who has taken the thermal camera from the agent. She uses the camera on Jenny and admits that she was bitten, so she asks Jenny to go after George to buy some time. Sheila returns to the main room and screams loudly to attract the attention of the remaining infected, who immediately pounce on her and tear her apart. Jenny finds a hole in the wall that Henry opened to get into the tunnel, and as she is about to enter, Louise grabs her. With a wrench, Jenny throws Louise to the ground, then the girl walks down a small passage and notices, thanks to the thermal camera, blood droplets on the floor. She is startled when she sees some animals, but they are only mice, not lab rats. Jenny finds the blueprints and Henry's shirt near the stairs leading to the sewer tunnel. She looks down and sees George, who tells her that the antidote didn't work and Henry has also turned into a monster. Jenny ignores George's warnings, climbs down, and notices that blood is dripping onto her thermal camera. Suddenly, Henry appears and attacks the girl, knocking the thermal device to the side. While Jenny struggles to hold off her opponent, George grabs the thermal camera, takes the weapon, and knocks Henry to the ground. Once free, Jenny takes the thermal device and uses the wrench to finish Henry off with a blow to the head. At that moment, huge flames erupt from the hatch, indicating that the police outside have set the terminal on fire. Unfortunately, the exit is blocked, but Jenny finds the luggage tunnel and removes the cover. George is too scared to go down, so Jenny gives him the thermal device and lets him go first. When they hear explosions outside, they run as fast as they can, but Jenny soon becomes tired and realizes that she is also infected. George turns around and sees that the girl is not feeling well but refuses to leave without her. Jenny agrees to follow her friend, if only for his sake. Finally, the two find a path blocked by a grate. George almost makes it through, but at that moment, a fully mutated Jenny attacks him. Fortunately, the monster girl cannot fit through the narrow grate, and George manages to slip out of his jacket and free himself. George flees the airport, unaware that Louise's infected cat is following him out of the tunnel and directly into the city.